Now here's the, and again, we'll be sharing this document so that folks can watch that tomorrow when it's posted. The continuum that we have to present in this plan, we have to have an in-person learning with new safety requirements model. This would include all students return in person with classroom schedules, protocols, and all modifications to meet the health requirements laid out by the state. Second one is the hybrid learning. Students learn both in person and at home remotely. And the remote learning takes place exclusively at home. And there's a couple of different ways that can happen as well. If there's a shutdown of schools like in March, that would obviously refer us to remote learning. But also for students and parents that decide not to come back to school, and just so everyone knows, that will be a choice for all of you. If you're not comfortable with this model and you want to learn remotely, that will be an option. So there's a couple of ways that remote learning can happen. So here's our color-coded system, which we're trying to make this as user-friendly as possible. And we thought of a stoplight signaling. On your left, you'll see the green is return without restrictions, in person. And this one is when there's a vaccine or a cure. This is the old way of school, or the old normal. So that's green. And yellow is next. In-person learning with new safety requirements. Students return in person. Schedules, protocols modified to meet health requirements, compliance with health protocols. So this one's a little different here. There's more restrictions. There's safety precautions and mitigations, masks, spacing, social distancing, all those kind of things. But it has majority of students that can return and staff back. Then the orange model, which is the one we're recommending to start off with, is hybrid learning to start out, with students learn both in person and remotely, where there's training, reinforcement, and compliance with health protocols. And then the red is the remote learning. We talked about the two options with that. And I'll get into more specifics of the model that we've identified. But if orange is our option of hybrid, our goal obviously is to go to the left, but we can pivot to the right to red, or to the left yellow, seamlessly when we have our final plan done, and that's the goal. So within our orange hybrid, we were really big fans of, and a lot of people spoke to this, about phasing this in. Again, go slow to go fast. And our state has successfully done this to date, and we really like that model, and we want to be a model for the state as well, and how we re-enter learning. And so the first phase is staff in the building for PD, which is professional development, training, and preparation. There's a lot of new mandates. There's a lot of new safety training that our staff is not familiar with. So there needs to be time to do that. We absolutely understand and appreciate that. It says there, this may be 3 to 10 days, determined by the Commissioner of Education. Right at the start of our meeting, I got an email that there seemed to be an agreement with the Mass Teachers Association and the Commissioner that will be 10 days. So I think that's a good breakthrough. I think it's knowing that now we can adjust our phases as needed. These phases are adjustable. Again, they're just initial recommendation. And so the teachers, now that we know from the Commissioner, will be in 10 days. And what that does is it shortens the school year by 10 days. So the traditional school year is 180 days. This upcoming year will be 170 days. Okay, and the time on learning will be reduced accordingly. We'll get those numbers out. So that's hot off the press. And so now that we know that, we can start getting a schedule of working on updating and revising our calendar for the school year, and start giving people actual dates instead of weeks. And that's kind of why I had the first, second, third week here. We did not know what the Commissioner was going to decide. So just found that out. So if it's 10 days, again, that's before school starts. It's time to prepare our staff for safety protocols, for new learning, for remote learning, technology, all that kind of stuff. Then phase 2, which would be the first week of school, whatever that day might be, and we'll get that out as soon as possible. Staff are in the building, and all students begin remote learning. And so the thought process here was, if we had less days, 3 days, 4 days, that we may need more time, which would be a week. to allow staff to connect with the kids, introduce them to the protocols and how we are doing school now. And then it'll allow that week time. You'll see built in this phase-in model, orientations. We really felt strongly that school is going to be very different for children and their families. So before students just showing up at the door, we wanted to ease them in and have opportunities where they come to their school and they have a way to see the expectations, see how to line up, see where their classroom is, talk to their teachers, get their questions answered, and also couple that with parent forums in which parents will be oriented to the new protocols, get their questions answered before their children start the school the following week. So that would be broken up into phases. So we thought that was their primary focus students. The state refers to them as high needs. We felt primary focus was a better way of phrasing that, and the state has identified 5 categories of students. And so we will have to define that at Scituate. We have not done that yet. Tonight we allude to one category there, but that can include different groups, with, for example, students with special needs, intensive special needs, homeless students, English learning students, pre-K to 5 is a high priority for the state. So those are some examples of students, once we define that will be coming in the first phase. Phase 3, second week of school. Staff are in the building. Primary focus students begin their face-to-face learning. So we've oriented them the first week, connected with our other students remotely online to do opening week activities, get them acclimated, and then we have actual students in the building. Again, these phases can be adjusted, timelines. They're just recommendations right now, as we didn't know the phase 1 amount of days. So all remaining students returning to school will have orientations this week. So all other students will return in phase 4, but in the second week of school, they'll all be coming in and having an orientation as well as their parents. So we're going slow to go fast. We're having students come in, talking about how we do lunch, how we're lining up, how we enter the school, leave the school, safety precautions, and the same for parents. I think this is a community. It's going to take community teamwork. For example, at home, we're going to ask that you reinforce the same strategies we're using at school to mitigate the spread of virus. And that's wearing the mask, social distancing, hand washing, and not sending your children to school when they're sick. So those things will be reinforced, and it's our goal that at home and in school we're speaking the same language and have the same expectations so that we can do this right. So that's the reason for the orientations. And then the third week of school, students are back in a hybrid model, which I'll explain in the next slides. But that's our phase in of a hybrid model. So we're coming in slow. We're not bringing everybody in at once or even half the school at once. It's a more measured approach, and it's a safer approach. And then down here, after 3 weeks of this learning, now that we're all into our rhythm, this will be 6 weeks into the year. It would be a good time to assess how things are going. By then, we'd have a lot of feedback from parents, students, faculty, and staff in the community to adjust as we go. Again, the whole goal here is flexibility. So are we ready to go to yellow? Do we need to go to red? That kind of conversation. So that assessment is allowed after the 6 weeks. So here's a typical overview of what a schedule might look like for a hybrid model. And the A-B model means that students would be split in half to reduce the number of students in a school at one time. So if your school has 500 students on Monday, 250 approximately would be in school. The other 250 would be at home learning remotely. And this particular model is a 2-day on, 3-day off model. We looked at several models. Our task force did a real good job of researching each and conversations about that, as well as our steering committee. And we found this was the best for Scituate. Again, there's no right one. You'll see multiple different cohorts out there. And I'll talk a little bit about the strengths of that. The So the first cohort, let's say you find yourself in cohort A, and we may break them up alphabetically. Another thing we're very cognizant of is scheduling so that students in the same family go to the school on the same days. So if we were to do that alphabetically, would likely be the scenario where that could be best addressed across the district. So that group Monday would go a full day, cohort A, and go a full day on Tuesday. This allows back-to-back days and continuation of learning with students for teachers. And then on Wednesday, you'll see, and then it's flipped. I'll jump to Thursday and Friday. Then we simply flip it on Thursday and Friday. Okay. And then if you look at the middle here on Wednesday, that's a remote learning day for all students. And we felt this was really important because this is going to be a very flexible time, and we're going to be adjusting as we go. In the old tradition, and this is one thing I like about this model that wasn't in traditional schools. So there's some new things that really could be done better. And that was just built in time for professional development and collaboration. Kind of as we go, work with our staff and have time to improve the curriculum, adjust, get feedback. And so Wednesday is kind of broken up into the PM being opportunity for adults to do that. And it will allow us to be flexible, but also to coordinate and communicate district-wide to make sure that instruction is of a high quality. What it also does too is we built in a deep cleaning day. With all the children out of the building in the middle of the week in between cohorts, medical advice would say that that's a good time to clean in between cohorts, have a day in there to do that. So that will be our deep cleaning, and we'll get that plan out in the final draft. But that made a lot of sense to us as well. The other beauty of this model is in the morning, teachers are working with individual students, either with office hours for extra help. Students could come into the building by appointment, working with staff. Evaluations, I know we have a lot of work to do on our special education evaluations that allows us time to get those done. So it creates a window here where students can get the specific help they need and individualized attention. It also slows things down a little bit, allows us to do some professional development and collaboration and clean the buildings. Now I'm going to go back and talk a little bit about what a typical Monday would be. And we don't have all the specific details. Again, this is a framework, so it'll invite questions, and then we'll hash those details out. But for example, the ideal situation would have, let's say there's 20 students in the grade 1 class. 10 students would, in that class, let's say they're in Miss Jones's class. The 10 students would be in person with Miss Jones here. 10 students, the other 10 that are in that class would be home, but through Zoom or other technologies would be working with that class simultaneously. I think another advantage that we learned in this remote learning time is to have meetings where some people are present and some are not. And we think we can do that. I know other schools are doing that where their kids, and another thing we thought was important that we heard loud and clear, that this new remote learning will not be March's remote learning. Okay, and that's kind of what you're seeing here is these students at home will have a set schedule. They'll have access to a teacher. They'll be learning, they'll have assignments. The time may be a little less to allow for more asynchronous work, knowing that parents have unique schedules. But what we'd like to do here is keep them with their classmates and connect them with technology so that they're continuing learning. So the same lessons being taught in this example. And then when they switch here, the teacher just gets to work in person with this group. Cohort A is now online, learning and getting the information from the teacher at the same time. Finally, what this does is if we go into a red situation, a remote situation, the same teacher has been teaching the same children in this model. If we were to go remote, they've been learning the same thing. We don't miss a beat. Miss Jones still has her cohort. Now they're all just learning remotely. And the curriculum continues as it would in class. That's kind of the difference between March's reality and this reality, is that the expectation would be that the instruction would continue, and we've got it built in time here that we can assess how that instruction is different at home knowing that it is. And so, for example, if we were to go from a yellow to a red, we'd have time built in weekly to work with our staff, talk with our staff, get feedback from our families, and adjust as we go. So there's the built-in flexibility within the model to allow our staff to adjust and provide the essential curriculum for our students. It also allows, if we were to go to yellow and have all students return, for example, if we go to 3 feet distancing at some point with health guidelines, all students are able to return. Ms. Jones's students would simply all be in the room now. So that's the ideal situation. What this also considers is that students and staff may not be able to return to school, either medically or in the student's case by parent choice. We certainly respect and appreciate that and have that built in. Those students would have a separate remote experience. Okay, we could put them in a class here, or we'd have teachers working at home remotely too to act as support and for our teachers that are in the building. So I think that would enhance learning as well. So we were able to configure that in this model too. So early childhood model. One of the recommendations, like I said, of getting kids back is our concern over our pre-K and K students, actually our elementary students. We all know that all kids are important to come back to school, certainly, but the priority in the youngest years is the most important in our learning. You learn to read, write, get social cues. So with a nearly empty building, we wanted to include our early childhood students in that primary focus group and get them back on a 4-day school in person with 6 feet social distancing. Please know that all these recommendations that we decided to go with were with 6 feet spacing. We understand that in preschool and kindergarten, that's tough to do sometimes, and we will do our best. And there's some strategies out there to do that, and we'll look at that with our staff and work with the medical field on how to best do that. It's not yet in this document, but the state guidelines are students will wear masks grade 2 through 12. We're going to recommend that all K through 12 students wear masks. We're not going to mandate that at the younger grades now. We're just going to highly recommend it. And again, this is an option for parents. So for our pre-K and K, Monday they'd be in person with their teacher, actually Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Wednesday, both half day and full day would be learning remotely. On the 4-day-a-week model, the half day students would go home at a half day and the full day students would stay the full day. And we understand that there's a difference between half day and full day learning. We wanted to make sure that in our remote model is also reflected so that when we roll this out on Wednesdays, there'll be a full day of learning for structured learning, a little differently obviously than the in-person. And the half day students will receive the half day version. So we'll be working on that to kind of delineate the difference and such. And I just wanted to put the slide down to just kind of reiterate why we're recommending that and I know some districts are bringing back K through 5. Eventually, again, the flexibility would be let's go slow to go fast. If our younger students who are typically follows instructions I think they're a great group to be in, but here's some reasons why we thought about that. Early learners, PK to 5, considered prioritized by the state. I said that, and ultimately the goal would be able to get in all elementary first if we could, if space allows and safety. But we wanted to, with the space we have, include pre-K to K in the first wave. The survey results, parent forums, and other solicited feedback showed that the distance learning was least successful for students in the youngest grades. We understand that pre-K and K students, have a more difficult time than middle school students or high school students sitting in front of the computer for any period of time. So that's another obvious reason, and that was very clear in the feedback we received. Students in the youngest grades need to learn through playing hands-on, experience and practical activities such as drawing and social interaction, obviously best utilized in person. And then for many of these young students, this is their first opportunity for building relationships and connections with school setting. We talked about social and also emotional connections there. The shorter attention and limited independence of young students makes distance learning extremely difficult. and children under 10 transition rate, that should be, excuse me, transmission rate much lower than adolescents or adults. That's the current data shared with us by our school physician. Preschool and kindergarten lays the foundation for future learning. And so we're going on 2 years of them, those younger kids, all kids, but especially those pre-K and K of no in-person instruction. So that was a concern to us. That would be our recommendation moving forward, with the ability to flex more students and more grades in or less, depending on where we go with our plan. You know, I know a big question would be about fees, and we haven't decided on that. And that's a school committee matter that I know we'll have to face it as we develop the final plan. They just want to include that we have a plan, haven't discussed fees at this point. Well, here's remote learning in red. And again, I said this earlier, it's not your spring of 2020 remote learning. So we've had time to improve this. We're continuing to work on this. We'll work on it as we go. I kind of mentioned a lot of these when it recurs. The third bullet's important, I think. It's to replicate a typical school as much as possible with structure and accountability. And it's back to that. We're all in this together. So that's accountability for all of us. You know, starting with me, our staff, our parents and guardians, and our students. You know, so if this is going to work and this phase-in approach will work, we all have to contribute and follow the expectations. But there will be more structure when they're at home than there was before. And specifically schedules, rigor, grading, attendance, that'll all count. I know in the spring it didn't. And so that's an update. Consistent curriculum and instruction across each grade level, school, and content area. So, you know, this is, again, a wonderful opportunity for us to work with our staff. And because the remote learning will, you know, whatever format we're in, whether it's all remote or hybrid remote, it's a great opportunity to get all grade 3 students across this district learning the same curriculum, same pacing. And that's our goal for all grades. So this is a fresh start and ability to do that. The timing on Wednesdays allows, and now with the reinvention, if you will, of Zoom meetings, we can allow inter-school meetings where the elementary schools and upper grade schools can actually meet in professional development and talk about curriculum on our Wednesdays. So that's an advantage to getting smooth and consistent curriculum out across our schools and grade levels. Something that I'm not sure was happening before, but is needed, and I think is a common learning platform. Instead of having multiple platforms, I think we have to be consistent on, okay, what are we committing to? Is it Google Classroom? You know, is it Schoology? And is it different at each school level, elementary, middle, and high? And so we want to be consistent with that, make it easier for students and parents and staff. You know, and this middle one is a kind of important one to me, and includes daily face-to-face contact. I think, you know, that's got to be an expectation that in our new learning that your children will get, you know, daily contact with educators and adults in as much as possible. I think that you'll see the difference in this model versus old models. And then use developed curriculum apps aligned to mass frameworks. And then we talked about time for teachers to plan and discuss student needs. Okay, the last slide is transportation. Several core practices will support safe school bus operations this fall. And just so you know, families, I'll be sending out this week a survey. I know after hearing the plan now and having a day or two to think about it, your mind may have changed or you may have decisions, but I'll be asking you, you know, if you plan to send your child back to school at this point, your mind still may change, but it gives us an idea for our planning. I'll also ask if you're deciding to still take the bus. And if you've already paid, you'll certainly get your money back. But these are the protocols, and I would encourage, because of the new bus regulations where it's basically one child per seat unless you're in the family, that this may force us to do multiple bus runs and possibly stagger start times if we have to take multiple bus runs, because we've reduced considerably the amount of kids that can be on a bus. So if there's a way that you could get your children to school, I would highly recommend that. Masks, so all students on the bus, regardless of age, are required to wear masks. So this includes kindergarten and preschool students for the bus. And exemptions for students for medical and or behavioral reasons and associated protocols are further described in the guidance. This is right from the Department of Education. So we'll work with families like we will with students wearing masks in school. If there's an individual case where the child cannot wear a mask, we'll work with the families. That's going to be part of our orientation and education process for our students and families and staff, is to ensure that those students that aren't wearing masks are not alienated, but also that we keep safe distances from all students. And that's why the 6 feet rule is a better model at this time than the 3 foot rule. Just another example. So distance on the bus, students should be seated no more than 1 student per bench, alternating sides for each row. So like diagonally, we will have these marked. So they'll be at least 3 feet apart. And the bus seats are pretty tall, so that's a built-in divider. Children from the same household may sit together and in proximity. For example, 2 students from the same family can sit side by side. And so in ventilation, common sense, we'll keep the windows open as long as we can, unless the weather's too cold or extreme conditions. Students will be assigned to a bus, and they will be assigned seats. And a question has come up, and this was, good feedback, is, bus drivers driving the bus, who's going to monitor? The kids keep their masks on, stay in their seats. So we are considering at this time adding bus monitors. So we're strongly considering that. It has not been official yet, so we'll have to look into that, but that will help with supervision. The last point I made here is that just the state governance on bus transportation. It talks about all children in grades, we're mandated to provide transportation to all students in grades K through 6 who reside more than 2 miles from the school. We're not entitled to provide it for anyone else. I'm not saying that we're going to that model. I am saying that we're going to do everything we can to avoid that. But I did want to put that because I know other districts have gone to that. So again, it's depending on how many bus runs, how many students are taking the bus. So that survey will be really helpful with getting back to us whether you plan on sending your child to school and or on the bus. Couple last notes that I've added to the presentation is athletics. The Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic Association is working with the Commissioner and Department of Education, and they have a task force, and they've postponed the season right now to September 14th. So no further decision has been made right now. They're not canceled fall sports, but they are postponed to September 14th. Also, I know there's probably a million questions floating in everybody's head, and I know, this isn't a forum, but we will be offering, I think the parent forums went over very well, and we're willing to do that again. Now that we have a plan or a draft plan in place to answer specific questions on the plan, and I think that's going to help us, guide us in our task force work and our steering committee work to finalize this plan. So I hope that's helpful. So we'll be offering those forums. Again, we'll be sending surveys out. Staff that are on tonight, your principals will be meeting with you this week because we feel that's important to get your feedback and feelings and input. So we're working right away to get feedback on this as well. And as far as community feedback, we do have my email is bburkhead, wburkhead, WBURKHEAD @scit.org. So if you can email me, and we have a kind of an email hotline, 2020 reopen @scit.org. And just so you know, that email, you'll get an automatic response that just basically says to you, we've received it, we're going to forward this to the appropriate committee, and we send that to our steering committees or task force. And some of them are very personalized, so we don't share the personal information with the committees. But we also ask if there's personal information, now that we have a plan in place, that may be more specific to a certain school, that you may contact your principal. So we wanted to give you multiple forums to do that. Also, as far as our communication going out, we'll continue, and we hope that you find the Thursday Thoughts helpful. We'll continue to do that. I want to thank Ms. Brandolini for attending this morning's community access Monday morning report. We'll be doing that each morning with rotating school committee members. That will be live and posted. So I want to thank Seth for all his work on that, and for the select board and Town Administrator Boudreau for welcoming us in that venue. Just one more opportunity to share what we're up to. And our website, again, we have one specific website where that's a work in progress. Please be patient with us, but tonight's documents and every other document that we're getting, we're going to start putting up there so you have one place to go. So I think that's it for me right now, Chairman Gates.